Hey kids, it's Caroline Brown again, and I'm going to show you how I make my four-fold books. The first thing I start out with is an idea. And your idea is going to be the poem that you write. Well, I had a couple of poems about pelicans because when I used to go to the beach as a little girl, my grandmother used to say about the pelicans, and it's a poem that she didn't write, but I love it anyway. A wonderful bird is the pelican. His beak can hold more than his belly can. And there's another one that I found. It's called the Pelican Chorus, and it starts out, King and queen of the pelicans we, no other birds so grand we see. None but we have feet like fins with lovely leathery throats and chins. So I'm going to do my book about pelicans. So when I decided on my idea, I went and found some pictures. So here's a picture from a book that I have that I used to tear up and put into my artwork that's got pelicans on it. I found a picture of a lighthouse that reminds me of the beach. And I used my old dictionary that I tear up to find the page that has the pelican definition on it. So I'm going to use all those towards the end of my book. Now I'm going to show you the way that I work on the piece of paper. This is going to be the same kind of paper that you're using. And I have chalk pastels, charcoal. So let's see, these are colored. This is black. I have an old credit card or hotel key. I have some paint and I have my glaze. Now the glaze looks white right now, but it will dry clear. So you start on your fresh piece of paper, and the first thing I'm going to do is write part of my poem with a piece of charcoal. So it says, a wonderful bird is the pelican. And I just wrote those on the paper. I'm going to take my old credit card, and can you see how I do this? I'm going to, wait, get it right in there. There we go. Scrape it up with the card. So see how I do it like that and it sticks to the card? And then I'm going to go over the writing. And what that's going to do is keep the chalk sort of glued into the paper. So I just keep scraping the glaze over the paper until all of my words are covered up. And it gets a little smudgy, but that's okay because this is part of your background. And it doesn't even matter if it gets so smudgy that you can't read it, because you're going to know it's there. Alright, so I've scraped over all my words. And now, because I'm doing something about the ocean and ocean birds like the pelican, I'm going to use some blue. And I'm going to take my colored chalk and add some blue. And you could do it into the wet places or the dry places. And here's another shade of blue. And you can cover up some of where you've been already. And maybe I'll add a little bit of green. Now, because this is chalk, just like the charcoal, it's kind of messy and dusty. We want to glue that in too. So I'm going to take some more glaze and scrape over everywhere that I put chalk. And that's going to keep it from smudging or rubbing off later. One cool thing you can do is you can scrape over the chalk like that, and it sort of picks up some of the color. And then I can move that color over to another side. And so you just scrape over everything that is dry and powdery. Okay. And you see how it sort of moves the color around too. All right. So that's our first step. That's glazing and drawing with chalk. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do to our piece of paper is to use my card again, my card scraper, and I'm going to take some of the paint the same way that I took the glaze. I'm going to scrape it up with my scraper and then put it down on the paper. And see how you make it really thin so that you can go over the words, but you can still read the words a little bit. And I put a little bit over here. You don't want to use too much, but just enough to give it another layer. Okay, so there's scraping with the paint. Now the glaze can be used for one more thing. We're going to collage some tissue paper. Now collage is just a fancy word for gluing down. And I've got some orange tissue paper here. And for this I'm going to actually use a brush. So I've got my brush. I'm going to take a little bit of the glaze on my brush and find a spot where I want the tissue paper to go. I think I'm going to put it down here in the corner. So you want the paper to be wet so that it has some glue for the tissue paper to stick to. And then you just lay it down and then go over it again with your wet paintbrush, and that will seal it in like that. Okay, and I have some blue tissue paper too, and I think I'm going to do a big piece over here. So again, I'll get it wet. Make sure there's enough for the paper to stick to. And then I'll put it down right here. And don't worry if you have little crinkles, that makes it interesting. Like that. And then the cool thing about this tissue paper is that it's kind of see-through. So if I want to do another piece on it, this is already wet right here. I can put this piece on top of it. And see how this makes a darker piece right here because it overlaps. And if you do two colors, it'll change the color even more. So here I put the orange over the blue, and it makes almost a dark green color right there that's really pretty. And I think I'll put one more piece of orange in this corner. There we go. So it's nice and wet. And then you smooth it down with the wet brush, put a little glaze on top, and you've got your tissue paper. Okay, you can see that we're making lots of layers here. We've got our writing layer on the very bottom, we've got some chalk layers, we've got some paint layers, we've got some tissue paper layers. The next layer we're going to make is one of my favorites. We're going to print with bubble wrap. So I know you've all used a stamp and a stamp pad before to print things. Well, this time I'm going to use bubble wrap to do my printing. So I'm going to take my yellow paint and just paint it right on top of the bubble wrap so you can see all the circles. Just like that. And now when I turn it over, I'm going to stamp it like you would with a rubber stamp. And look how cool that is. It leaves circles. Okay, I want to make some more big circles, so I'm going to put some paint on there again. And this time I'm going to stamp it over here. And just real gentle, you don't want the bubbles to pop. And then, you know what, without even putting any more paint on it, I can do it again right there. Ooh, that looks nice. And let's see, I'll try it one more time. Yeah, I still got some. All right, I have some little bubbles too. So I think I'll use some orange. And I'm going to paint the orange on the little bubbles. I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of blue to make it not quite so crazy orange. And print that. And see how the little bubbles turn out. Nice. I love orange and turquoise together. I'm going to put some more bubbles up on this side. Yeah, see how good that looks? And maybe one more spot over here. Okay, so now we've got another layer with some bubble wraps. And I can still read my writing under there a little bit, can't I? Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about are stencils. Now you may have used a stencil before, something with alphabets on it. The stencils I like to use are things you can usually find around the house. This is a doily, a paper doily. This is some fancy ribbon with holes in it. This is an old piece of ribbon that has holes in it. And sometimes I make my own stencils. I cut this one out of a piece of plastic. And this one is a star. It's just made out of paper. And this fish that I used, made out of paper. Now, after we did our bubble wrap, I let my paper dry a little bit because it was getting really wet. So now that it's a little bit drier, I'm going to do some stenciling. Now the trick to using a stencil and not getting it really, really gloppy, like if I used this big wet paintbrush, all the paint would go through and you wouldn't be able to see the stencil pieces very well. I use this little makeup sponge. And I think I'll do this color. You squirt out a little paint and pick out your stencil. I think I'll use my doily right now. And put it down like that on the paper. I take my sponge. Can you see there? There we go. And dip into a little bit of the paint so it's not too gloppy. And then you push the paint through the holes of the stencil. Real gently, just kind of going up and down, because you don't want it to go over the holes. You know, you just want it to go straight up and down and not really sideways like with the paintbrush. And I'm going over the top of the stencil too because I want to be able to see that edge. So I got that side. I'll come over here. And you want to pick a color that's going to show up. You wouldn't want to do yellow on top of yellow, would you? You could do like a dark orange over yellow or blue over yellow. And I think this green is going to show up nicely, especially on the orange. So now take that out a little bit. Up here. And now when you pull your stencil off, you can see the pattern that it made. If you use this with the circles in it, you do it the same way. You hold it down like that, get some paint on your sponge, and just kind of bounce up and down on it. And you can see those great circles. Now there the paint got a little thick, but that's okay with me. I don't mind if it gets a little bit messy. Because after all, it's just part of the layers, right? Let's see. I think I'll use this star, maybe with some, how about purple? purple would be good with this. So I'll squirt out a little purple and put my stars in. And I'm going to use my same sponge, but just use the other side of it that doesn't have any paint on it. So that looks like a good place for a star. Turns out pretty well. Here's a cool trick. Where's the paper towel? Now that the paint's all on the outside of the star, I can flip it over, press it down, and I got a little bit of a star there. You can do another one this way. That's a good one. How about up here? There's a star. Let's see, I'll do another one that way. See what happens. Not bad. It's kind of a little bit there, but not totally. It's kind of nice because you want to have some variation. Maybe I'll put a couple of red stars too. Let's see. All right, I'm going to use the third side. Well, that's got some yellow on it. Let's see. I have another sponge here. And I'll put a star right there in red. And we haven't done anything over here, so let's put a star right there. Star right there. And I think I want some red circles too. So let's put those right here. And you just kind of plan it out as you go. You have an idea of what you're doing, but you let it just build up as you go along. There's some nice red ones. I think we need some red over here too. And remember, everything, it's fine to overlap and cover things up. And you can still peek underneath and see what was there before. Yeah. All right, so that is how you stencil. Okay, now that we've got our layers built up really nicely for the background, it's time to turn the piece of paper into a book. So you'll want it to be dry. So you may do all the first steps one day and then let this dry overnight and then come back to it to do this part. Because what we're going to do is fold it and then cut it, and you don't want any of the wet pieces sticking together. So the first fold we're going to make is to go long piece, long edge to long edge, like that. And crease it down, but not really hard. Just sort of soft like that. Okay, and then open it back up. And then we're going to go short edge to short edge. Like that. And again, crease it gently. Then we're going to take this edge and come backwards. Like that. Flip it over. And pull that edge back too. Okay. Now that we have our creases, open it back up and turn it over so you're looking at the back. Now I can see all my nice creases. I have my line through the middle. So I'm going to start here and go down the middle to here. Okay? And the easiest way to do that is to fold it again like this, to take your scissors and go down that middle line. Like that. And just cut to the first edge of the crease. Okay? Now when you open it back up to the colored side, this is the tricky part, but you can do it. We're going to take your hands into this sort of open mouth piece now. Okay? And we're going to make this crease look like a tent. Okay, so make both of those look like a little tent. Okay, so it should look like that. Now we're going to take hold of those two tents and pull backwards. Okay, so what we want to do over here is make this into a tent on this end and make this into a tent on this end. All right, so now we have 4 tents. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now take these two again, and we're going to make it stand up like that. Okay? Now, I'm going to pull this over and real gently press it down, and you can start to see where your pages are. And now it's a book. So I've got these pages, and that's the back. Now I'll show it to you one more time from here. All right, so we have a tent on this side, 2 tents in the middle, and a tent on this side too. And that's going to help you with the folding. So you pull it away from each other like it's a mouth opening, and then those become pages. And the middle part is the inside of the book. Okay? And now you can even decide which page you want your cover to be, because maybe I like that page, but you know, maybe I want this one to be. I just fold that around and gently press it down again, and then that can be my front. Or maybe I like that one. So I'm going to fold that around and real gently press it down again. And sometimes you're going to see the other pages sort of overlapping. That's part of the beauty of it. You want it to be really interesting, and that sort of gives you a peek at what's coming next. All right, so now take some time to do your folds and your cuts and turn your big piece of paper into a book. All right, now that we've made our paper into a book, it's time to add some of our collage pieces. So here's my picture of the pelican, and I'm going to put it right on the cover. So I'm going to take a clean paintbrush and use some of our glaze again. Now you could use a glue stick, you can use the glaze, you can use Elmer's glue, and I'm going to put the glue on the back and on the paper. And I'll put it down just like that. Now, one of the tricks that I like to do is I'll put wax paper over it and really press it down to make sure it's really stuck and there are no air bubbles in it. Okay, just like that. And then I usually put a layer of glaze over the top again, but you don't have to. Okay. Now, while you're working on the pages like this, you may want to slide some wax paper underneath it. That'll keep the paint from getting all over the other pages and maybe gluing itself together. All right, now I really like this picture and I like the way the stars are, but right now it's kind of floating on the top of all of our layers. So I think what I'd like to do is push it back a little bit. And the way I'm going to do that is by covering up one of these edges. And I think I will use, let's see, I'll try the stencil. Let me get another sponge. And I'm going to stencil some blue so that part of it's on the picture and part of it is on the paper. So I use my sponge the same way we did before with my stencil, and I'm just going to bounce it like that. And this is how here's a big word for you, integrate my pictures that I've collaged, that I've glued on there with the rest of the page's composition. And I'll pull that off. So that's kind of interesting. It doesn't really show up enough for me though. I think I'll use this again, and maybe with a darker color blue. Not that one. How about this one? Because I want it to show up more. So let's do this now. Oh yeah, that's going to show up. There we go. Now see how this picture isn't right on the top of the book anymore. It's pushed down because this paint line is on the top now. I also have a picture of a lighthouse, but I think I'm going to use that on the inside. So maybe, let's see. Okay, what you should do now is think about the pictures that you're going to use in your book and which page you're going to put them on. And you can go ahead and glue those down and then use either your bubble wrap or your stencils or even some paint. Like I could take, where's my scraper? I could take this card and some of my yellow paint and scrape it right there. And now that pushes this edge of the pelican picture backwards again. And leaves a nice little spot right there. Maybe I'll put a word later. Okay? So that is collaging our pictures down and then integrating them into the composition. Okay, now that I'm still working on this front page, I'm ready to put a word on it. And I've got some alphabet stamps here, and these are a little bit smaller here. And I'm going to write the pelican. And I think I'll take a pen and write a wonderful bird up here, because I like to have my own handwriting, but I also like to have these blocky looking stamps too. So these are really cool because they're magnets, and you stick them onto this metal bar. I always like to try it out. Sometimes I've got my letters turned around backwards. Alright, so that says "the," just like it's supposed to. So I'm going to stamp it. And I think I'm going to put it right here. And go down. Uh-oh. Huh. There it is. It says "the." Okay. And now I'm going to use the bigger letters for pelican. And they don't have to be in a straight line. I like it when it looks like it's sort of wonky. Make sure you spell it right. I've had that happen too, where I spell the word wrong. Turn around the right way. Oh, that fits just right, doesn't it? Alright, so now I've got the pelican. And since we're talking about stamping, another thing I like to do with stamps, I love circles. And this is a chapstick tube. And I'm going to make some circles now with this. Let's do a little turquoise, since we've got turquoise up there. And we'll just spread it out a little bit like this. Let me show you. So I've got the paint here, I'm spreading it out. I'm just going to push it in like that. And stamp it like that. I like that. Okay, so while you were gone, I worked a little bit more on my front page. I added some more circles and I wrote "A Wonderful Bird Is" with the marker, just a plain old black marker, and then with the skinnier one I outlined the stars, and I also went over my stamped words because I didn't think they came out quite clear enough for me. So I think I'm calling this side done. Now what you're going to want to do is take all the pages and do that and add pictures and words and maybe some more bubble wrap, maybe some more stenciling. And the final step that you'll do, because all artists and writers have to sign their work, don't they? You're going to find a place in the book to sign your name. So I'm going to do it on the back here, but you could do it anywhere. If I had a better place on the front, I might do it there. So I'll sign my name. And this is one of my favorite stamps. It's a date stamp. And I put this in all my journal pages. So I've got it set for May the 20th, 2013. And I'm going to stamp it right here. So I will always remember when I made this. Well, kids, thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the art project. I hope you enjoyed making your four-fold book. And I hope that you'll send me some pictures of the work that you've done with Miss Calzini and your other teachers at school, because it's really fun for me to share my artwork with you. Thanks. Bye-bye.